Over the last 8 or 9 months, I have purchased for digital cameras 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I bought one back, 10 digital cameras. And as of today, lunchtime today, I sold every digital camera I have except one. So which one did I keep? Which one did I buy twice? And what has this taught me along the way? I'm Chris Brogan. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I talk about photography as meditation, but I talk about photography as meditation. And one part of being a photographer, which is teaching me a lot about other parts of my life, is this whole concept of this thing that they call GAS, Gear Acquisition Syndrome. And boy, did I have bad gas. All right, let's talk about it. So I have, the first piece of my notes says to remind you what matters to you. When I started this, I started by buying what was kind of more or less a point and shoot kind of a camera. And this is only just this year. This doesn't count any previous purchases. But I bought a point and shoot kind of camera and I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. It's nice, it's fun, I like using it. That was the Sony ZV-1F. And it's kind of like a video blogger kind of camera. It's kind of a small, it's got the flippy screen though so that you can look at everything. What it doesn't have is an interchangeable lens. What it also doesn't have is, it's kind of the lower side of features. You can't do a lot with it, but you can do exactly what you set out to do. One of my favorite channels, Broccoli Beers, does incredible things with the ZV-1F. I'll put a link to one of their most recent videos because it shows you kind of the quality of this very small, definitely entry-level kind of a camera. So then after that, I said, well, I'm gonna need an interchangeable lens kind of camera. I'm gonna need something a little more real. So I bought the Sony A6000. Came out in 2014. I've already made a whole video about this. You can also see that in the description. I made a whole video about this once, so I'm not gonna go back into why a Sony A6000 is great. It's like the Honda Accord or the CR-V of cameras. It's fine, it's good, it does its job. Sony makes a good product. It is still good to this day. You could use one in 2025 and not feel bad. I think it's a great product. So then, after that though, that's kind of when the mania starts. And so I started with this idea, oh wow, I really need one of these cool cameras. So I went to look at buying a Fujifilm camera. Now, if you don't know, a Fujifilm camera, Sony's good. It's like a Honda CR-V. The Fujifilm camera is like any really cool, whatever your version of a cool car is. Could be a Mini Cooper, could be one of those cool Hyundai Ioniqs, whatever one you see that you go, ooh, that's kind of peppy and sporty and neat looking and flashy. Fujifilm X100VI. The thing is, you couldn't buy them anywhere. You'd have to have had been on a waiting list for years. So I did what everybody does in that circumstance. I went on eBay and I bought one for more than the list price. Bought it, got it home, tried it out, said, wow, this is so cool. Immediately didn't like it because it didn't have interchangeable lenses. I was like, ugh, I don't know. Sold it back on eBay, sold it for pretty much the same exact price I bought. I mean, I only used it for a tiny bit. Some other nice person got it. I then got the Fujifilm X-T5. What a great camera. It has all the same sensor and technology as the X100VI, but it also had interchangeable lenses, and I got to try all kinds of cool lenses. Loved it. So in this process, I started with a not bad camera, realized I wanted something just a little more pro, realized that interchangeable lenses are important to me, and boy, have you seen me talk about lenses a lot. Then I said, oh, I need something a little more flashy. It's not good enough to be like the CR-V. You see how kind of my interests and desires and everything changed over time? It's what was mattering to me changed really quick. Now, let's pause for a second. What if you don't know what matters to you? What if you're not sure what you want to pick for a camera? Because I knew, with that Fujifilm, I knew I really need interchangeable lenses. I need the ability to have a zoom lens and a prime lens and a really small pancake lens for street photography. But what if you don't know what you want? I belong to a lot of different subreddits on Reddit that talk about people helping pick out like the camera that they want. And people will say, like, they'll say things that make it clear that they haven't really used cameras a whole lot yet, because they're like, I want one that can take really good portraits and astrophotography. Now, any camera can do everything-ish, but some are better for one thing, some are better for another. A lot of times it's the lens that makes it different. And you need sort of different specs. Well, if you have no clue what you want, how do you fix for that? Here's my opinion on that. Buy something simple, buy something easy, buy something very resellable, and get in at kind of a lower price point. Now, I know you're gonna freak, oh no, because you're a person who likes to go all in on your gear. We're gonna talk about you in a second. But if you start at something that's not super expensive, you can release it back to the world. One of the really cool things about cameras that is not true of a lot of other pursuits, passions, hobbies, and pastimes is that they are very, very resellable, which is how I kind of went on this run that I did. So I had the ZV-1F, I had the A6000, I got the, then I sold it. I sold the ZV-1F, I sold the A6000, I got the Fuji 106, sold that, got the Fuji X-T5, held on to that. And then I thought, you know what, instead of the A6000, which I sold because I figured the Fuji was a better choice, I went, but maybe I need a good video camera. So I got the ZV-E10 from Sony. See a little trend here, I'm buying a lot of Sony. I buy the ZV-E10 and I'm like, oh, this is pretty good, this is awesome. And then I have this. This is the Insta360 Go 3S, and it's what I use to make my videos. And it's like a little action cam for a not very action-y dude. And it's perfect, it's great, and I sold the ZV-E10 kind of quickly. Then I did another thing where I said, you know what, I have a new hobby. I got new hobby Mania. And I bought, just for fun, I bought an old DSLR. I bought the Nikon D800. Old workhorse kind of camera, like an incredible, like, photojournalist used it kind of DSLR, big, lunky, heavy, ka-chunk kind of shot. I had so much fun. I loved it. Used it for like a month or so, sold it back because I knew I wasn't going to use it as much as my other stuff. But what fun! New hobby mania was there. But then I started realizing the next part of the journey. New false wisdom. There's kind of like a fake summit, like in mountain climbing, where you think you've hit the top, but you haven't. And in the first burst of new false wisdom, you start thinking, you know what? Now I know what I want. I am totally smart. I've got everything I want. I'm going to pick the thing I want, and I'm going to get myself a full frame camera. Now, the A6000 and the Fujifilm X-T5 and the Sony ZV-E10 are all APS-C sensors. It means cropped, it means a slightly smaller sensor. The good parts of having a cropped sensor is they're lighter weight, they're inexpensive compared to full frame cameras. There's a lot of benefits to buying a cropped sensor. And there's a few drawbacks, one of which is, for instance, if you want to shoot in low light, it's a little more work to get it out of an APS-C sometimes. Please, you're going to come and argue with me in the comments, it's fine. Full frame has some advantages, APS-C has some advantages. This is kind of church, and I won't get into it, but I was like, oh, I need full frame. So I got the Sony A7R II. I immediately didn't like it for a few reasons. One was I learned that the battery life was a little different, and it got better in subsequent versions. And I immediately gave it back to MPB and bought instead the Sony A7 III. What a chef's kiss of a camera. People use it for video. I only used it one time ever for video. I love it for photography, but people do use it for video. The Sony A7 III. It's Sony Alpha. It's sort of their, I don't know how you'd say it. Instead of like a Honda CR-V, this is more like the Honda Pilot. It's still not a fancy thing, but it's pretty good. So the A7 III was great. Somewhere in there, and I forget even where it was, but it was somewhere along the lines, I decided I need a little pocket cam. I got the Ricoh GR3X. Great camera, kind of competes with the X106. It's wonderful. I thought it was fine. And then I realized, I'm just not using it as much because I'm always taking out my big camera. I don't necessarily need a pocket camera, or so I thought. I sold the Ricoh GR3X back pretty quickly. Great camera, wonderful camera. Small, easy, simple, does not have a tilty screen. It's one fixed lens again. I liked it. It wasn't for me entirely. Now where am I in the journey? Well, first false wisdom's come and gone. Now you're really thinking, what kind of camera should I get? First question, budget. What's your budget? If you don't have a whole lot of money, you could start small, especially if you start with something like interchangeable lens systems, like the A6000, which is crop, like something like the Sony A7 III, which is full frame, like a lot of different cameras. You could start with a smaller budget. You could start with an older version of a camera and kind of work your way up. They say this in cameras. They say that you date the body and you marry the lens, that you kind of build the system around the lens. When I first heard that, remember I said about first false wisdom? When I first heard this, I was like, baloney. You just get a best body you could possibly get and then you buy the lenses that you think will go well with it. I was wrong, like I often am. But then I figured out you got to start taking a longer view. And as I did, I realized, they're right. The lens kind of drives everything. So for instance, I just sold my Fujifilm X-T5. I sold the lenses with it. I have such deep regret of only one thing, was that my Fuji 35mm f1.4 lens is probably the favorite lens I've ever used in my life ever. It's not even the best lens. I just love it. I love the character. It felt great. I loved how it shot. I don't know. So they were right about that too. Now, once we start getting the real wisdom, the next thing is you have to start thinking about your specific mania, the thing that drives you. I made a whole video about my love for vintage lenses. You know that. You know that that's my thing. That might not be your thing. You might be a mania for, I want the sharpest photo in the world. I'm kind of the opposite. I want the blurriest photo to go with my eyesight that's not going so well, and evidently my ability to use words. I then started looking at, if I'm gonna like really sink myself into this, this is where I get to the I sold all my cameras and I just held on to one. So what one did I hold on to, by the way? I'll tell you that and then I'll tell you what my next plans are. I went and repurchased an A6000. I just showed you a video about this again. I'm not gonna go into it, but why did I do that? It's a great everyday carry kind of camera. It has plenty of features. You could argue to get the A6300 or something, but I liked the A6000. I just got that. It works fine. It does what I want. It has a nice viewfinder. It has a nice screen as well, so I can look through a viewfinder, or I could use the screen. There's even a black and white mode. I've been really into shooting black and white, at least in my on-screen, and then I can take the RAW later and do other stuff with it. It does everything I want it to do. It's fine, but it's not the camera for me. Let's go through this. So Fuji, I think that the kind of person who buys a Fuji camera is somebody who wants right out of the box, super creative kind of feel. There's a lot of film simulations in Fuji. It's actually got great color science. Everyone's gonna complain about the autofocus. The autofocus has gotten better. I think Sony's autofocus, I don't think any of us will argue that Sony's autofocus is better, but there's other reasons why you might prefer Fuji. I think they're great. Cameras that have a fixed lens, like the X100VI, the Ricoh GR3X, a Leica, like a Q3. The reason you want that is you just are done with all that stuff. You don't want interchangeable lenses, you just want to shoot. You want to come up from a point and shoot, but you just want to shoot. George Holden uses the Sony RX1R, I think, or the RX1R2. I think he does the first one. And that's his reason. It's full frame, it's point and shoot, it's great, it's easy. Sometimes you just want point and shoot. Canon, I have not very much experience with Canon. I think they're great cameras. I can't tell you anything about them. Panasonic, I have shot Panasonic Lumix cameras before. They're great. I have not shot any of the new ones. The S9, the S5 II, is it? I haven't shot any of the newer Panasonics. They're great. If you want that camera, that's great. Other kinds of lenses, like sensors, like micro four thirds or medium format, there's all kinds of other rows to go down. Nikon. If you want to buy a Nikon, they're just the workhorse kind of camera. They're still, you know, they have a better experience from the older days than modern. Like they had a bigger market share in the older days. I think Sony ate a whole lot of their market share, but Nikons are solid. The Z6 III is a really good camera these days. The ZF, I think there's some really swell Nikons. Didn't pick those. I went with Sony. The next camera I will buy, and which I hope will be my camera for a bunch of years, is the Sony A7 IV. I sold the A7 III, which came out in I think 2019, and I'm gonna move into the A7 IV. I'll just get it in a handful of days. The reason I want that is because it gets me just a little more towards, you know, modern day. I will be able to use it for a bunch of years. I have all kinds of Sony lenses still, some Sony lenses. I have a whole bunch of vintage lenses that I can adapt to Sony with my adapters. I think I'm gonna be happy with that. Now, why that camera? Simple, reliable, dependable. The autofocus works great. It's a very kind of not very, it's not flashy or zippy, but it's really good at what it does. And that's why I landed on Sony. Price up reasonably. I think it's a generally good camera, and people might say that they don't like the shots straight out of the camera. Fine, shoot and then edit in RAW like I do. I loved Fuji's really cool film simulations. I stopped using them almost right away because I just edit in Lightroom. You can use the camera how you want. If you don't feel like editing in Lightroom, great. Use a camera that has those kinds of film simulations or LUTs or whatever. That's fine. I ended up with Sony for that reason. So I have my A6000, and I'll probably have a A7 IV not too long from now. But this journey, explaining it to you, do you see the kind of meditation around all this? The idea of why you choose what you choose and what it means to you and all those kinds of things? Just wanted you to think about it with me. I hope you're well. I'll talk to you more. Remember, you can always send me an email, chris@chrisbrogan.com.